The Thanksgiving table stretched long enough to seat regret at both ends. I sat near the middle, boxed in by polite chatter and casserole dishes I'd spent 2 days preparing. My husband David presided at the head, laughing louder than necessary at his brother's jokes, wine glass perpetually full. His mother Joan sat to his right, fingers wrapped around her stemware like a scepter. Our daughter Emma, 15 and sharp as her grandmother's tongue, sat beside me picking at mashed potatoes. She'd been quiet all evening, quieter than usual, which meant she was listening. Everything had been fine until dessert. David's sister Marla brought up home renovations. "We're finally redoing the kitchen," she announced. I told Richard I refused to cook in a space that feels like the 1980s. Joan nodded approvingly. "A woman deserves a beautiful kitchen. It's where she creates magic." David grinned, gesturing vaguely at me. "Well, some of us are luckier than others." "Claire's been asking me to update ours for what, 3 years now?" I smiled tightly. "4, actually." He laughed, turning to the table like a comedian working the room. 4 years of hearing about cabinet hinges and backsplash tile. Honestly, I keep telling her, maybe if she spent less time complaining and more time working, we could afford it. The table went silent for half a breath before his brother chuckled nervously. Joan sipped her wine, face neutral. Marla looked at her plate. Heat crawled up my neck. I worked 40 hours a week managing operations for a medical office while also running our household, raising our daughter, and keeping David's life organized enough that he never missed a meeting. "I work plenty," I said quietly. David waved his hand dismissively. "Part-time admin stuff isn't the same as a real career, sweetheart. I'm just saying, if you want nice things, maybe aim higher." The room stayed quiet. No one defended me. His family had perfected the art of looking away. I gripped my napkin under the table, nails biting fabric. 4 years of marriage had taught me when to let things go. This should have been one of those moments. But Emma had stopped eating entirely. Her fork clinked against porcelain, louder than it should have been. She looked at her father with an expression I didn't recognize, something colder than anger, sharper than disappointment. "Dad," she said clearly, "you know Mom makes more than you, right?" David blinked. "What?" Emma tilted her head, voice steady and surgical. "Her salary." "It's higher than yours. Has been for 2 years. I saw the tax returns when you left them on the printer." The color drained from his face in stages, rose to pink to chalk. Joan's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. Marla's eyes widened. Richard coughed into his napkin. David forced a laugh. "Emma, that's not, you're confused." "I'm not," she said flatly. "You make 62,000. Mom makes 78, plus her bonuses." Silence didn't just fall, it crashed. I stared at my daughter, stunned. I'd never told her those numbers. She'd found them herself, kept them quiet, and deployed them at exactly the right moment. David's jaw worked, searching for words that wouldn't come. His brother looked away. Joan set her glass down with deliberate care, suddenly fascinated by the tablecloth. Emma wasn't finished. "And the kitchen?" she continued, voice calm as glass. "Mom's been saving for it herself. But every time she gets close, you borrows from the account for golf trips and new watches." David's chair scraped backward. "That's enough." "You're right," Emma said, standing. "It is." She looked at me, eyes asking permission I didn't know I could give. Then she walked out of the dining room, leaving her father pale and speechless at the head of the table. I stood slowly, folding my napkin with hands that had stopped shaking. "Excuse me," I said to no one in particular. Joan finally spoke, voice thin. "Claire, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "It's not," I said. "But thank you for dinner." I followed my daughter into the hallway. Emma was waiting by the coat closet, arms crossed, jaw set. "I'm sorry if I embarrassed you," she said quietly. I pulled her into a hug so tight it surprised us both. "You didn't embarrass me. You defended me." Her voice cracked. "He always does that. Makes you sound small." "And everyone just lets him." "I know. Why do you let him?" That question, simple, devastating, hung in the air like smoke. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. The drive home was silent except for radio static David kept adjusting to avoid conversation. Emma sat in the back seat staring out the window. I watched streetlights blur past, replaying the dinner in my head. When we pulled into the driveway, David finally spoke. That was unacceptable. Yes, I said, it was. He turned, confused. I meant Emma. She had no right. She had every right, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. And she was correct. You're going to let her talk to me like that? I'm going to let her tell the truth, I said. Something you've avoided for years. I got out of the car before he could respond. That night, while David sulked in the guest room, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier. Emma appeared in the doorway, pajamas on, hair tied back. You okay? I will be, I said. She sat across from me. What are you doing? Research. For what? I looked at her, this fierce, brilliant girl who'd just taken a sledgehammer to her father's ego in defense of mine, and realized I'd spent 15 years teaching her to be strong while modeling silence. For what happens next, I said. She nodded. Good. By morning I had a plan. Not revenge in the dramatic sense, no screaming, no destruction, but the kind of quiet reclamation that changes everything while looking like nothing. Step 1, separate finances completely. Step 2, consult a lawyer. Step 3, stop explaining myself to people who'd already decided I was less than I was. David tried to apologize over breakfast, though it sounded more like damage control. Last night got out of hand. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Yes, you did, I said, pouring coffee. You always do. Claire. I'm moving money into my own account today, I said evenly. From now on, household expenses split 50-50. You'll get an invoice. His face flushed. An invoice? Are you serious? Completely. This is ridiculous. So was last night, I said. But here we are. Emma appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, and kissed my cheek. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. David's mouth opened and closed. She didn't wait for a response. By the end of the week, I'd met with an attorney named Priya Chen who listened to my story with the calm focus of someone who'd heard it 1,000 times. You're not asking for divorce yet, she clarified. Not yet, I said. But I want to know my options. Smart, she said. And financially, you're in excellent position, better than most. I nodded. That was the irony. I'd been financially independent the entire time. I just hadn't acted like it. Document everything, Priya advised, especially joint expenses and withdrawals. If this escalates, you'll want records. I already had them. Years of spreadsheets, receipts, screenshots. I wasn't just prepared, I was armed. David's family reached out cautiously. Joan called twice. I let it go to voicemail. Marla texted an apology that felt more obligatory than sincere. I thanked her politely and didn't elaborate. The only one who surprised me was Richard, David's brother. He sent a short message. Emma was right. You deserved better than that. Sorry I didn't say it then, I replied. Thank you. Small decencies, even late, still mattered. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, David tried a different approach. Charm. Flowers appeared on the counter. Dinner reservations were made. He even suggested we talk about the kitchen. I've been thinking, he said, over takeout he'd ordered without asking what I wanted. Maybe we should go ahead with the renovation. You've earned it. I set down my fork. I've always earned it. Right. I mean, yes. Exactly. He smiled. The same smile that used to work. So let's do it. Fresh start. I don't need your permission for a fresh start, I said. I've already started one. His smile faltered. What does that mean? It means I'm done waiting for you to see me as equal, I said. I'd rather just be it. December arrived with the kind of cold that made everything sharper. Edges, voices, decisions. I opened a solo checking account on the first Monday of the month, transferring exactly half of our joint savings, plus every dollar I'd contributed over the past 2 years that David had borrowed for his hobbies. The math was simple once I stopped pretending it was complicated. When the transfer cleared, I felt lighter than I had in years. David noticed within 3 days. He cornered me in the kitchen while I was making dinner, phone in hand, face flushed. Did you take money out of our account? I took my money out of our account, I corrected, stirring pasta. Yours is still there. Claire, we talked about this. No, I said calmly. You talked, I listened. Now I'm done listening. His jaw tightened. This is childish. It's called boundaries, I said. Adults use them. Emma walked past carrying textbooks, headphones on, but I caught the smallest smirk at the corner of her mouth. She'd become my silent audience, witnessing a version of her mother she'd never seen before. The second phase of my quiet revolution involved something David valued more than money: reputation. For years I'd attended his company events as the supportive wife, smiling, small-talking, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. His boss called me a gem. His colleagues assumed I was decoration. When the annual holiday gala invitation arrived, I declined. "What do you mean you're not coming?" David asked, staring at the RSVP I'd filled out. "I already told everyone you'd be there." "Then you'll have to untell them," I said. "Claire, this is important for my career." "So is mine," I said. "I have my own work event that night." A lie, but a useful one. The truth was, I'd rather spend the evening reorganizing closets than pretending David's accomplishments were ours. He went alone, sulking the entire week leading up to it. When he returned that night, jacket loose and cologne fading, I was already in bed reading. "Everyone asked about you," he said, hovering in the doorway. "I'm sure they survived," I replied without looking up. "My boss said it was strange you weren't there." "Then maybe you should explain why your wife stopped volunteering as your accessory." He left the room without another word. Emma had become my unexpected strategist. One evening while we folded laundry together, a ritual David never participated in, she asked, "Are you getting divorced?" I paused mid-fold. "I don't know yet. But you're thinking about it." "Yes." She nodded, smoothing a towel with careful precision. "Good. You deserve better than someone who makes you feel small." "When did you get so wise?" I asked softly. "When I realized you'd been teaching me strength while forgetting to use it yourself," she said. That sentence stayed with me for days. By mid-December, David's frustration had curdled into something uglier. He started small, passive-aggressive comments, sighs when I spoke, exaggerated eye rolls during conversations. Then came the night he tried control disguised as concern. "I talked to Joan," he said over dinner. "She thinks you might be going through something. Hormones, maybe." She suggested counseling. I set my fork down deliberately. "Counseling for what?" "For us," he said quickly, "to work through this phase. This phase where I have self-respect." His face reddened. "Don't twist this. I'm trying to fix our marriage." "You're trying to fix me back into someone convenient," I said. "There's a difference." Emma didn't even pretend not to listen anymore. She sat at the table doing homework, pen paused, absorbing every word like courtroom testimony. David leaned forward, voice dropping into that tone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "I think you've forgotten what marriage means. It's partnership. Compromise." "You're right," I said. "I have been compromising for 15 years. Your turn." "My turn for what?" "To feel what it's like when someone decides you're worth for you." That weekend I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I went out with friends. Not couple friends, my friends. Women I'd slowly lost touch with because David always had something more important planned. We met at a wine bar downtown. Lena, my old college roommate, hugged me so hard I felt ribs shift. "I thought you'd forgotten us," she said. "I almost did," I admitted. "We talked for hours about work, about life, about marriages, both thriving and struggling." When I finally told them what had happened at Thanksgiving, Lena's jaw dropped. "Emma said that? Out loud? At the table?" I nodded, smiling despite myself, word for word. "She's my hero," Lena declared, raising her glass. "To daughters who don't let their mothers disappear." We toasted. For the first time in years, I felt seen. David called twice while I was out. I ignored both. When I came home near midnight, he was awake, sitting in the dark living room like a sentry. "Where were you?" "Out." "With who?" "Friends," I said, slipping off my coat. "Remember those? You didn't tell me you were going out." I paused, genuinely confused. "I'm 38 years old, David. I don't need permission to leave the house. That's not what I—" He stopped, recalibrating. "I was worried." "Were you?" I asked. "Or were you just unused to not knowing where I was?" He didn't answer. I went upstairs without waiting for one. The real shift came 2 weeks before Christmas. I'd been quietly networking, and a former colleague reached out about a management position at a larger practice, better hours, better pay, actual leadership responsibilities. I applied without telling David. 3 days later, they called me for an interview. A week after that, they offered me the job. 78,000 became 95. When I told Emma first, she hugged me so tightly I had to laugh. "Mom, this is huge." "It is," I said, still processing. "And I did it completely on my own." "You always did," she said simply. That night at dinner, I told David, his fork hovered mid-fare. "You're switching jobs?" "I'm advancing," I corrected. "Significant raise, title promotion." "I start in January." He blinked, clearly scrambling. "You didn't mention you were looking." "I didn't mention a lot of things," I said. "Turns out I don't need input for my own decisions." He set his fork down, voice tight. "This feels like you're trying to prove something." "I'm not trying," I said. "I already did." Emma grinned into her water glass. Christmas at Joan's house loomed like a rescheduled trial. David assumed I'd skip. I considered it. Then I decided showing up, poised, unbothered, fundamentally changed, would be far more satisfying than absence. When we arrived, Joan greeted us with cautious warmth. Marla hugged me briefly, whispering, "You look amazing." I did. I'd bought a new dress, elegant, expensive, paid for entirely with my own money. It felt like armor. Dinner conversations stayed polite, but the air hummed with unspoken tension. David tried to dominate the table talk the way he always did, but this time when he made a joke at my expense, something about me finally getting ambitious, I didn't shrink. I smiled. "Ambition was always there, David. You just stopped noticing when it outgrew you." The table went silent again, but this time Richard laughed, a short, surprised bark of approval. Joan's lips twitched. Even Marla looked impressed. David's face darkened, but he said nothing. He'd learned that much, at least. After dessert, Emma found me on the porch where I'd escaped for air. She leaned against the railing beside me, breath clouding in the cold. "You were incredible in there," she said. "I was honest," I replied. "Turns out it's the same thing." She smiled. "Are you really okay with all of this?" I thought about it, the separation of finances, the new job, the quiet reclamation of a life I'd been living on someone else's terms. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm awake." Emma nodded. "Good, because you taught me never to settle. I just needed you to remember. You taught yourself that too." We stood together in the cold, watching Christmas lights blink across the neighborhood, both of us finally understanding what strength looked like when it stopped apologizing. January brought the kind of clarity that only comes from crossing thresholds you can't uncross. My first day at the new job felt like stepping into a different version of my life, one where my opinions mattered before I had to justify them. The office was modern, the team respected competence over tenure, and my title, Director of Operations, appeared on business cards that actually reflected what I did. David's reaction to my success had evolved from dismissive to resentful to something quieter and more dangerous: fear. He started asking questions he'd never cared about before. "How was work?" became a nightly interrogation disguised as interest. When I mentioned my new salary during a budget discussion, he went silent for a full minute before muttering, "Guess you don't need me anymore." "I never needed you," I said calmly. "I chose you." "There's a difference." His face went pale, the same shade Emma had turned him at Thanksgiving. The symmetry was poetic. By February, our marriage had become a polite standoff. We lived in the same house, slept in separate rooms, and spoke only when logistics demanded it. Emma navigated the tension with the grace of someone who'd been preparing for this her entire life. One evening she asked me directly, "When are you filing?" I looked up from my laptop. "Filing what? For divorce?" she said, as casually as if asking about dinner plans. I exhaled slowly. "I don't know yet." "Why not?" "Because I want to be sure," I said. "Once I do it, there's no going back." "Good," Emma said firmly. "Going back would be a waste of the woman you've become." She was 15 and already wiser than most adults I knew. The decision came not from anger but from exhaustion. David had started what I could only describe as a charm offensive flowers again, promises to do better, suggestions of couples therapy that always involved me changing while he made adjustments. The final straw came during an argument about the kitchen renovation I'd finally scheduled myself. "You're really doing this without even asking me?" he said, voice rising. "I'm doing it with my money, in my house, on my timeline," I replied. "None of which require your permission." "Oh, you are house," he snapped. "Oh, you are marriage." "My name is on the deed," I said quietly. "Yours was added later. And the mortgage? I've paid 70% of it for 8 years. His face went from red to gray. "You've been tracking that?" "I've been tracking everything," I said. "You just never noticed because you assumed I wasn't paying attention." That night I called Priya-Chen and told her I was ready to file. Divorce paperwork is surprisingly mundane: forms and signatures, assets divided into columns, a marriage reduced to bullet points. When the process server delivered David his copy at work, I wasn't there to see his reaction. Emma told me later she heard him on the phone, voice shaking, asking his mother what he should do. Joan called me that evening, her tone icy with the kind of politeness that barely hides fury. "Claire, I think you're being rash. I think I'm being deliberate," I replied. "David's devastated." "David's discovering consequences," I said. "They're not the same thing. You're punishing him for one mistake." 15 years of mistakes," I interrupted. "I just stopped keeping score quietly." She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't call back. The custody arrangement for Emma was the easiest part. She was old enough to choose, and she chose me without hesitation. David didn't contest it. I think he knew that if Emma testified in court, the things she'd say would humiliate him far worse than anything I could. The financial settlement, however, became a battle. David's lawyer tried to claim he deserved alimony because he'd supported my career emotionally. Priya laughed out loud during the mediation session. "Your client makes $62,000 annually," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "My client makes 95. She also contributed 70% of mortgage payments, funded household expenses solo for 3 years, and covered 80% of their daughter's costs. If anyone qualifies for support, it's her." David's lawyer flipped through the documents, all my meticulous records, every receipt, every bank statement, and his face fell. "We'll need to reconsider our position," he muttered. By April, the divorce was finalized. I kept the house, my savings, and my peace. David kept his pride, though significantly less of it than he'd started with. Emma threw me a freedom party the weekend after the papers were signed. Just the two of us, pizza and movies, no speeches required. Halfway through the second film, she paused it and turned to me. "Do you regret any of it? The marriage, I mean." I thought carefully. "I regret staying longer than I should have. But I don't regret you." She smiled. "Good answer." "And you know what?" I added. "I don't even regret Thanksgiving." She laughed. "Really, really. You saying what you said, that was the moment I stopped pretending, so thank you." "You're welcome," she said, grinning. I've been saving that line for years. We both laughed until we cried, the kind of laughter that only comes after survival. 6 months post-divorce, life had settled into a rhythm I'd designed myself. Work thrived, Emma thrived. I'd even started dating again, nothing serious, just reminders that partnership could exist without diminishment. Then came the invitation that completed the circle. Joan was hosting another family gathering, Easter this time, and shockingly, I was invited. The note was handwritten, careful, almost apologetic. "It would mean a lot if you and Emma could join us." Emma raised an eyebrow when I showed her. "Are you going?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to prove I'm fine. Another part doesn't care what they think anymore." "Both can be true," Emma said wisely. "Go if you want closure. Skip it if you already have it." In the end, curiosity won. Walking into Joan's house felt surreal. Same furniture, same floral arrangements, entirely different power dynamic. When Joan greeted me, she hugged me longer than expected. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I owe you an apology." I blinked, genuinely surprised. "For?" "For not defending you," she said, "at Thanksgiving. And for years before that. I told myself it wasn't my place, but that was cowardice. It was the apology I'd stopped expecting. "Thank you," I said simply. David arrived late, alone, looking thinner and older than 6 months should allow. When our eyes met across the room, he nodded once. I nodded back. No words necessary. During dinner, the conversation flowed easier than I'd anticipated. Marla asked about my job. I answered honestly. Richard asked Emma about school. She lit up describing a robotics project. Joan asked if I was seeing anyone. I smiled and said, "Exploring options." David stayed quiet, pushing food around his plate, a ghost at his own family table. After dessert, he found me on the porch where Emma and I had stood months earlier. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We are talking," I said. He exhaled. "I mean really talk, about us." "There is no us," I said gently. "There's you, and there's me, and we're both better apart. I know I messed up." "David," I interrupted, "this isn't about blame anymore, it's about truth. And the truth is, you needed someone to feel bigger than. I needed someone to see me as equal. Those aren't compatible." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, for all of it." "I know," I said, "and I forgive you." "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation." He wiped his face quickly. "You seem happy." "I am," I said honestly. "For the first time in a long time." "I'm glad," he said, and surprisingly, he sounded like he meant it. 2 years later, life had become something I didn't need to escape from. Emma had started college with a full scholarship engineering, naturally. My career had expanded into consulting, and I'd even been invited to speak at a women's leadership conference about rebuilding after partnership failures. The speech centered on one line Emma had said years earlier, "You taught me strength while forgetting to use it yourself." The audience gave a standing ovation. Afterward, a woman approached me in tears. "My husband humiliated me at a dinner party last week," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do." "Start documenting," I told her gently, "then start deciding what you're worth. The rest follows." She hugged me like I'd handed her a map. That weekend, Emma came home from school for a visit. We sat in the newly renovated kitchen, white marble counters, soft gray cabinets, everything I'd wanted for years, drinking coffee and laughing about nothing in particular. "You know what I love most about this house now?" she asked. "What?" "It feels like you," she said. "Not like a compromise, just you." I smiled. "That's the whole point of starting over." She raised her mug. "To starting over then." "To knowing when to," I corrected. We clinked mugs, and outside the window the spring light turned everything gold-proof that some endings are actually renovations in disguise, and that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is let her daughter teach her the lessons she forgot she knew. And in the end, revenge wasn't about making David pale. It was about making myself whole.